The two words we could use to describe this Jacksonville Jaguars rebuild are unexpected and subtle. Just back in 2020, the Jacksonville Jaguars had an abysmal 1-15 record and finished last in their division. In the following season, 2021, they went 3-14 and again finished last in their division. In the offseason of the 2022 season, they hired new head coach Doug Peterson, who won a Super Bowl back with the Philadelphia Eagles back in 2017. So they knew the first thing they needed to do was change the culture and bring in a proven head coach. Doug Peterson took a look around the NFL and a look at his roster, and he instantly knew he needed to get better on the offensive side of the ball. The Jaguars spent $263 million in total contract money this offseason and $158 million in guaranteed players. 4 of those players being offensive players: Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, and Brandon Scherff. As the 2022 NFL season kicked off, the Jaguars were off to a very usual 2-6 start. But if you were trying to look at the bright side during that time, you could see each of the Jaguars' 6 losses were one-possession games. So they were in every game, they just weren't winning them. But there's a lot that goes into how the Jaguars were able to turn their season around and win 7 out of their last 9 games, finishing up the season with a 9-8 record, and here we'll take a look at some of those reasons. An area not only the team should be excited about, but the fans too, are the Jaguars wide receivers. With the NFL reinstating Calvin Ridley, the Jaguars quickly have become one of the best receiver groups in the NFL. But before we get to Calvin Ridley, let's talk about the foundation these receivers have already laid. All 3 of these offseason signings set career highs in receptions and receiving yards. Christian Kirk had 84 receptions for 1,108 yards and 8 touchdowns, which were all career highs. He added another 15 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in the playoffs, and being only the second player in franchise history to record 1,000 receiving yards in their first season with the team. Zay Jones added another 82 receptions, 823 yards, both career highs, and then he tacked on another 5 touchdowns. Evan Ingram joined the party with 73 receptions, 766 yards, and 4 touchdowns. All of these numbers were put up in each of the players' first year in the system. It looked very unlikely early, but the Jaguars turned their season around and finished up 10th in the league in total offense, 10th in scoring, 10th in passing, and 9th in third down conversions, which we all know is the money down. Trevor Lawrence threw for 4,000 yards this season, and now we're giving him a solidified number 1 option. That sounds like trouble. Calvin Ridley sat out a whole season, so some people could have forgot just how good he truly is. In 2020, Calvin Ridley had his best season for the Falcons with 90 receptions, 1,374 yards, which was tied for 5th in the NFL that season, and 9 touchdowns. He did that being the true number 1 option because the next receiver had just 72 receptions for only 786 yards. Ridley is a speedy receiver who ran a 4.4 at the combine, as did Zay Jones. So now you pair them together and you have 2 dynamic receivers who can put constant pressure on the defense. In Ridley's first 3 seasons, he was one of the NFL's best, being one of 6 players with 3,000 receiving yards and 25 touchdowns from 2018 to 2020. Pairing this already developed passing game and Travis Etienne Jr. being healthy again, you now have a well-balanced attack that can strike from multiple positions. The Jaguars had a 1,000-yard rusher and a 1,000-yard receiver in the same season for just the second time since 2004. This Jaguars team finished 14th this year in rushing, and while it's not as flashy as top 10, it's still very good and it could have been much worse. Travis Etienne missed all of last season and 5 games this season, but still managed to rush for 1,125 yards, which was good enough for 5th in the NFL on 220 rush attempts and 5 touchdowns. He was also top 5 in yards per attempt, and maybe the most impressive stat is that Travis Etienne was sharing reps until the Jags released James Robinson midway through the season. So yes, Travis Etienne cracked top 10 in rushing yards this season while sharing half of his carries early on. Imagine what it'll do being a full-time running back. Now you have the receivers, you have a versatile running back, and where the Jaguars should really feel comfortable about the position that they're in is that they have the number 1 draft pick from the 2021 draft. Now there was a lot of talk wondering if Trevor Lawrence was a bust or not, and I mean some of it was warranted. I mean they went 1-15 and then they went 3-14. But Trevor Lawrence was up to the task in the 2022 NFL season, and he reminded everyone why a quarterback with his frame and his arm talent is a generational talent. And let's face it, in the AFC especially, you have to have a great quarterback to keep up with these guys. In this season, Trevor Lawrence was one of only 9 quarterbacks to surpass 4,000 yards passing and the Jaguars offense cracked the top 10. And Trevor Lawrence truly got better as the season went on. It's not a coincidence that the Jaguars won 7 out of their last 9 games, and in that time, Trevor Lawrence was second in both completion percentage and passer rating, and he threw 15 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. Trevor Lawrence completed 387 out of 584 pass attempts, good enough for a 66% completion percentage, for 4,113 yards and adding 25 touchdowns. He also tacked on 291 rush attempts and 5 touchdowns. This was Trevor Lawrence's first 4,000-yard season, and he had 3 receivers have over 70-plus receptions for the first time in franchise history. He also set the franchise record for most completions with 387, and he was one of 3 quarterbacks in the NFL to have 25 passing touchdowns and 5 rushing touchdowns. And at 23 years old, he becomes the youngest quarterback and joins Michael Vick as the only #1 overall pick to win a playoff game before turning 24. The Jaguars late in the season had to win multiple games to even stay in the playoff race, including a 17-point come-from-behind win against the Raiders and against the Cowboys. And they beat the Baltimore Ravens on a go-ahead touchdown in a 2-point conversion. And they won 5 out of their last 8 games with come-behind victories, which Trevor Lawrence shined in them all. Which leads me to the biggest game of the year for them, the wildcard matchup versus the Chargers, and we all know the story. Chargers rush out to a 27-0 lead, and Trevor Lawrence throws 4 first-half interceptions. And the Jaguars come back to win 31-30. But the most impressive part of this comeback is the fact that to win a game like this, you need to either force turnovers or be perfect on the offensive side of the ball. And considering the Jaguars forced 0 turnovers and going off the first half, it seemed very unlikely that their offense would turn it on, but they did just that. Trevor Lawrence went 15 for 18 for 185 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half of that wildcard game, and became the youngest quarterback in NFL history to throw for 4 more touchdowns in a playoff game. What's more important is to hear how the Jaguars were talking on the sidelines while being down 27-0. There wasn't ever any doubt. Their defense this year was not a strong suit for them, but all that matters is you do what you're supposed to do when it matters, and this defense did just that, giving up only 3 points in the second half of this game. On the flip side, in the divisional round against the Kansas City Chiefs, wide receiver Jamal Agnew had a costly turnover in the red zone, trailing by 10 with about 5 minutes to go. If this turnover doesn't happen, the Jaguars possibly score and go down by 3 points with a lot of time left to play in this game. And who knows what could have happened, because if you remember, this is the game Patrick Mahomes initially tweaked his ankle. But more importantly, it was the response from Trevor Lawrence after the turnover and after the game that gives you hope if you're a Jaguars fan.
I'm proud of you, bro. It's not moral victories, but, bro, you fought your off. And that's all we can ask for. Trevor, we're going to be just fine, bro.
You come back from down 27 points. You go toe-to-toe with the Super Bowl champions that year. In the year after going 3-14, the Jaguars are division champs for the 4th time since the franchise's inception in 1995. And they also became the first team in NFL history to have the worst record in the NFL and win a playoff game in the following season. The Jaguars have the most important pieces for success, and that's a franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence and one of the NFL's best play callers in Doug Peterson. While developing their new talent, this team looks like a team who'll be poised to be the favorite in the AFC South for the next several years. Leave in the comments, are you going to hop on the hype train early, or are you not a believer? Thanks for watching. As always, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and check out my latest video about how the Philadelphia Eagles are coming back for vengeance next season. Peace.